Now, it happens pretty much every time I make a video that critiques or criticizes or points out flaws or plot holes in new Star Wars content, like pointing out inconsistencies in the currently running Obi-Wan Kenobi series, for example, and don't worry, there will be no spoilers for it in this video. Anyway, anytime I make a video pointing out issues of any kind in what we'll call Disney Star Wars for simplicity's sake, there will inevitably be some in the comments that'll make this interesting argument that Star Wars has never been particularly well made in the first place, that it's never really been consistent or without plot holes, or that it's always had these sort of silly contrivances that move the story along. They'll say that when you step back and look at it or really think about it, Star Wars has actually always been kind of bad, yet fun to just turn your brain off and enjoy, and that it's not something to be analyzed or taken all too seriously, that it's basically just frivolous stories meant for kids. Which, to address that last part really quickly first, not only are there some really great life lessons within Star Wars, chief among them I'd say that we should all strive to be a little more Jedi-like, to think a little less about the self, and a little more about what we can do for others. But the it's for kids argument also implies we should just naturally or inherently have much lower standards for kids when it comes to quality, or that kids don't or can't understand or appreciate good, consistent storytelling. And when we say kids here, we're not really talking like 5-year-olds or something along those lines. So yes, plenty of truly young kids watch and do love Star Wars. Instead, when we say for kids in this case, we're mainly talking younger teens and preteens. They were more or less the age range George Lucas kind of had in mind when creating the first Star Wars movie. And certainly kids in that age range do deserve and appreciate good storytelling. It'd be kind of strange to argue otherwise, because all I know is when I was around that age, I was already appreciating Star Wars for the story, not just the cool lightsaber battles and the space battles, though, yeah, they were awesome too. I was also reading books like The Lord of the Rings when I was 12, and very much appreciating what it is, which is arguably one of the greatest, best written works of fiction in history, and then being inspired to write that well myself someday. Not to mention the it's for kids argument completely ignores the fact that Disney heavily markets Star Wars and or Star Wars products towards adults, and they wouldn't be all too happy if everyone over the age of 5, which those who always say Star Wars is for kids apparently thinks is the target range, Disney wouldn't be all that happy if everyone over the age of 5 or even over the age of 12 suddenly stopped watching and caring about Star Wars, would they? I mean, Disney very much wants those adult dollars. They very much know that, in all reality, they are the target audience and the ones who really care about Star Wars the most, which isn't to say or argue Star Wars should become very mature, that it should suddenly become akin to Game of Thrones and stop caring about or appealing to that younger teen or preteen audience. Only that when it's good, when Star Wars is good, it's very much appealing to virtually anyone, which again is the goal of Disney with the franchise, to appeal to as many as possible and make as much money as possible, not just to cater to children. In other words, and to put it bluntly, the it's for kids defense is awful, and it's kind of embarrassing to see people using it to both imply kids or young teens don't deserve or appreciate quality entertainment, or that, if we're being real about it, the number of adult fans doesn't greatly outnumber the amount of kids who watch Star Wars and get into it these days. And sure, you can maybe make the argument that was different 40-some years ago when the first Star Wars trilogy was coming out, that more kids than adults really got into it back then, not that plenty of adults didn't get into it as well. But that's not the case today, considering Star Wars has far, far more competition for kids' attentions in the modern world, a world with nearly infinite entertainment options literally at your fingertips. And to again be blunt here, Disney would be pretty idiotic to not realize that one of the best ways to get the attention of that younger audience is to keep the attention and interest of the older audience, to make sure parents are enjoying Disney Star Wars so that they essentially indoctrinate their kids, so that they sit them down not only to watch the originals together or maybe the prequels, but that they keep watching modern Disney Star Wars together. But the truly crazy thing is that the it's for kids argument isn't even close to the worst defense of bad Disney Star Wars that I hear or see, which isn't to say all Disney Star Wars is bad. But oftentimes in videos, when again criticizing any of the new Disney stuff, I'll be told that I don't hold the original trilogy to the same standards that I do the new stuff, that I give those first 3 films a pass because nostalgia and bias cloud my critical thinking. They'll then go on to say that since Star Wars has always been rather poorly written, that it's always had plot holes, inconsistencies, silly contrivances, and so on, that we should not expect too much of modern Star Wars or for it to be any different than the original. I have literally had some make the argument that by Disney Star Wars being inconsistent and or poorly written in general, it's actually staying consistent with Star Wars or what it's always been, and therefore it shouldn't strive to be better and or more consistent or take itself too seriously because Star Wars has never been or done those things in the first place. And I'll now give you all a moment of silence to allow your head to stop hurting after hearing something so illogical. Because even if we concede the point, even if we say Star Wars has always been poorly written and full of continuity issues and or crazy contrivances, those issues are neither what made Star Wars good, nor the intent of the creator. No one has ever said Star Wars is so good because of George Lucas's poor writing and because of all those inconsistencies. I mean, it's not like Lucas sat down and decided from the very beginning that he was going to intentionally make anything in Star Wars inconsistent, and that by doing so, that would be one of the reasons it would be so good and beloved. By any metric, any and all flaws in the original trilogy and or the prequels are just that. They are flaws, and we can certainly have a discussion about how many there actually are and whether people are more forgiving of them because of nostalgia. But either way, and like it or not, for better or worse, even Lucas himself acknowledges or believes his original films were not perfect, and that those imperfections were not intentionally created, considering he has decided to make changes to those films after the fact. He both created the special editions of the original trilogy, and while he still owned Lucasfilm, he was constantly making changes in subsequent home releases of those films. After the prequels were done, he went back and made even more changes to the original films in order to make them more consistent, or to make the whole story more consistent in general. He did things like putting Hayden Christensen in as a Force ghost at the end of Return of the Jedi, and replaced Boba Fett's original voice with Tamora Morrison's, and so on. Basically here, and I'm not saying there are a ton of people that go so far as to say bad, inconsistent Star Wars is, in a roundabout way, somehow good and consistent Star Wars, but plenty of people do use the argument that since, according to them, it hasn't always been the best written thing in the world, and we can debate that again and maybe in a future video if people really want to see it. I will try to do take the nostalgia glasses off and, for fun, give a very critical review of the original trilogy. But anyway, plenty do make this argument that it doesn't have to be top-notch writing or very consistent or good because it's never been that way in the first place, which is ridiculous because that's never been the intent, nor is it what makes it good and enjoyable. Plus, we've had Kathleen Kennedy talking a lot recently about what she calls persistent storytelling and wanting to take Star Wars in that direction, which I'd argue is her way of saying they want it to be more consistent and that they want it to be a little more like the MCU going forward, that they're going to try to do more in the way of linear, character-focused storytelling instead of hopping all over the place and telling random stories. Either way, for that to work, for persistent, ongoing stories to work and for people to stay vested in them, to want to follow along, they pretty much have to remain consistent, right? Heck, it should pretty much be the first rule of something called persistent storytelling, that the events all line up and make sense, otherwise, what's the point of being persistent with it? In closing, I do get it. A lot of fans out there really just want to love and enjoy Star Wars no matter what. I want to love and enjoy it too, and it's absolutely fine if you've been enjoying any and all of it here in the Disney era. I have enjoyed plenty of it in this era as well. But it's really time to stop saying Star Wars is for kids. Like, that in itself is the end-all, be-all argument, because usually that's how it is stated, as if just saying it begins and ends some sort of argument about the need for it to be good and consistent. And along those same lines, like any story, Star Wars should expect it to be good and consistent if you want people to watch it and pay to watch it. The argument that it's allowed to be poor in some areas because it's, in your opinion, been poor in the past in those areas doesn't mean that it's ever been or should be the intent behind creating Star Wars, to make inconsistent, flawed stories that people will just for some reason enjoy. Nor are these past flaws entirely overlooked or even remotely what made it great in the first place. Not to mention, if this is all truly what you believe, that it should just be inconsistent because that makes it consistent or that's an excuse for it being inconsistent, whether you realize it or not, you are, for some reason, arguing Star Wars just should forever remain bad. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you think. Are these good, solid arguments, or do they make no sense whatsoever? And is it time for people to stop using them already? Whatever the case may be, take to the comments below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.